citizen, regardless of their home state. However, according to the Higher Ed Immigration Portal, 21 states and Washington, D.C. provide in-state tuition to the state's undocumented students. States have been able to get around this rule by creating a clause that allows for anyone who's completed 3 years of high school in the state to get access to in-state tuition. Recently, a federal judge in Nebraska made a ruling to end said clause in the Cornhusker state. Ira Melman is the media director for the Federation for American Immigration Reform. He says that most middle-class families across the nation cannot afford the prices at private institutions, and thus, in order to get a higher education, they must send their children to state universities.
But these are seats at these state universities that are highly valued, that could be filled by American students who also need the education.
Texas has also reached a similar deal with the Trump administration, and Oklahoma did the same last summer. However, not every state is ruling the same on the issue, with a federal judge in Minnesota tossing the challenge based on the 3 years of high school being enough to qualify for the exemption. Melman says that due to the different lower courts ruling differently, there's a possibility that this ends up in the U.S. Supreme Court.
The courts do look at intent. The intent was to bar states from offering tuition benefits to illegal aliens that they were not prepared to offer to any other U.S. citizen.
I'm Caleb Castile.
An offshore magnitude 7.8 earthquake rocked the southern Philippines early today, killing at least 32 people and injuring more than 200 others. More news online at afn.net and on the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Looking to take the next step in your education? Blue Mountain Christian University offers graduate degree programs designed for working adults who want to grow professionally and personally. With graduate studies in business, education, and kinesiology, BMCU combines academic excellence with a Christian worldview. With flexible and hybrid formats and supportive faculty, you can pursue a graduate degree while balancing work, family, and calling. Learn more at bmc.edu.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Monday, June 8th, nearly a week after California's primary elections last Tuesday. And shocker, the votes are still being counted and the ballots are still coming in. And all evidence suggests that California really needs to clean up its elections, and Congress needs to pass the SAVE Act. And according to Fox News, the California election rules, this is just absurd. Every registered voter receives a mail-in ballot. Mail-in ballots are valid as long as they are postmarked on election day and received within 7 days of the election. So apparently today is the last day to receive those ballots, and so there's no way just to have a election day and the results the same day. There is signature verification process, but what process that actually is definitely in dispute. So the big focus, of course, is on the governor's race and the LA mayoral runoff. And so Spencer Pratt, who has really risen to prominence in his advertising and as a Republican and wanting to actually clean up LA. That runoff hangs in the balance nearly a week after Election Day. So this coming from Fox News, with the jungle primary leaving incumbent Democrat Mayor Karen Bass already ruled to have advanced to a November runoff. Pratt's margin over Democrat City Council member Nithya Raman has slipped to just 1%, with a few thousand ballots left to make up the difference. And so people like Governor Ron DeSantis and others have been suggesting, maybe just they'll continue to count the ballots until the two Democrats win. Well, what's really going on in California? Let's welcome in Matthew Williams, who goes by the Prudentialist on X. You can follow him there. He's a writer and commentator. And Matthew, this just seems like a really, really bad way to run elections in California.
Yeah, absolutely, Jenna. I think that when we look at all this, as soon as they had said and announced just a week and a half ago that it wasn't going to have a result on the same day, that we became very aware that the same sort of ballot harvesting shenanigans we see in countless blue cities was going to take place again, especially after Spencer Pratt's, incredible rise to prominence and how well he's ran his campaign.
Yeah, and this is, I think, really frustrating to a lot of people outside of California, but in California as well. I mean, I've talked to friends there who have almost just given up on the process because they say, that that it's just so frustrating that Democrats always win. And is that, do you think, in LA specifically, but then in California at large, an issue of how the elections are run, or is it just that Democrats have actually overrun California?
Well, I think it's a mix of both. I think for starters, there's an obvious numerical advantage that Democratic voters have in California, both by a mix of our outrageous immigration policies, but also just how easy it can be to manipulate electoral outcomes. I mean, we just saw earlier yesterday from the first assistant attorney general in the first district of California that he was saying that, the federal government is trying to have an audit of the California voter rolls. And the Californian electoral system, they'll allow you to have ID, but if you can't produce a social security number, an insurance card that California provides, not just to actual citizens, but to illegal immigrants. On top of that, they'll allow gym membership cards to be accepted as a valid ID to vote. So overall, I think that it's a very disingenuous system that is obviously meant to give Democrats favor. But so overall, I mean, it's important for us to consider, as conservatives, as Republicans, that, California has more Trump voters than a lot of solid red states. And I don't blame them for feeling, disenchanted or disheartened, but it really does go to show that on the state level, the state government of California and Los Angeles County have fundamentally failed to provide anything that would be considered fair, that you and I would traditionally associate with an election.
Yeah, and that really ultimately undermines the public confidence in elections and that the process is actually legitimate. And I saw, Daily Wire and a few other outlets that were in days ahead of the election, kind of mocking that and saying, posting a photo of a guy in his car saying, "I'm on my way to vote in the California elections. I don't live there, but apparently that doesn't matter anyway." Obviously making fun of and mocking how the lack of rigor in terms of figuring out who is actually eligible to vote and who isn't. How that process is undermining public confidence in California. And, the fact remains that conservatives overall want to make sure that only the people who are actually lawfully allowed to participate in elections participate. And Democrats call that disenfranchisement, that if you have to show proof of citizenship, for example, if you have to actually show anything that would show that you're eligible to vote, is somehow disenfranchisement. And I totally disagree with that. I mean, I'm a resident of Florida, and so I couldn't vote in the California elections. And if I went to California and tried to, and they asked me, for eligibility paperwork, and I couldn't produce that, and then I was denied the opportunity to vote in California, the system would work. I mean, I should be denied, not based on citizenship, but citizenship in the state. And so the Democrats' whole view on this is to undermine not just public confidence, they don't really care about that, but it's become very clear that they want to undermine the process to allow the opportunity for people who aren't actually eligible to go ahead and cast a vote anyway.
Absolutely. And I mean, Democrats have made it clear since Trump, went down the escalator back in 2015 that for him, this process of election transparency and to actually have a proper understanding from everything with elections, whether it's chain of custody or making sure that actual residents who are either naturalized or U.S. citizens are the only ones that are allowed to vote. Democrats have been calling it racist. They've been calling it bigoted. They've been calling back to segregation for as long as I've been alive when it comes to matters of election integrity. And Democrats full well know that they have the overwhelming advantage where they control these large cities whose county registrars and departments of elections will bend over backwards to move heaven and earth to make sure that anyone, whether it's someone who just got off the boat yesterday or someone who's been homeless for 20 years on Skid Row, has the ability to quote-unquote vote. But we know with ballot harvesting and the inability to actually have proper signature verification that these Democrats can run wild in their cities. And I mean, we saw this in the 2020 2024 election, that every state in which Kamala Harris won has numerous cities and numerous rules on their state legislatures that allows basically no voter ID. And so I think for the disheartened Republicans of California and across the country, our anger and our ire shouldn't be directed just as much at the corrupt system that we've been making fun of for years, but really at our Senate GOP leadership for failing to pass the SAVE Act.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point, that if the GOP wanted to do something to help voters in California, and this really shouldn't be a partisan issue, because counting only the ballots that are not only cast legally but cast by an eligible voter actually affects the entire election outcome, and that affects everybody. And so both Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, whoever it is that can vote legally, they have a vested interest in the process being fair and the process being legal. And so this shouldn't really be a partisan issue, but the SAVE Act has become very hyper-partisan, of course, in D.C. because of the issues we've been talking about, Democrats versus Republicans. But last I checked, Republicans have the majority, and they could get over that 60 vote margin threshold. I mean, they tried to attach the SAVE Act to the reconciliation bill, I think it was last week, and 4 Republicans voted against that. I mean, that's just absurd.
Well, yeah, and I think it really does go to show the Senate, and I mean, of course, the GOP is not this monofactional, make America great again entity. I mean, we've seen since Trump went, like I said, since for the last 10 years of Trump, I mean, everything that he has done has fractured the Republican Party and has generated, I think, a whole coalition of people that would love to return to the, John McCain, Mitt Romney era of so-called conservatism and, move on and just treat this like it's business as usual at the country club, rather than answering the needs that millions of Americans have been crying out in the wilderness for, which was someone to actually represent them. And they know, as well as your listeners know, that Democrats have been championing on, these reckless rules on elections, as well as, open border immigration, because they know that they can overwhelm the Americans that want to vote to make this country great again. And so, of course, the SAVE Act is something that they don't want to support. But at the same time, I think a lot of conservative leadership in the Republican Party, especially in the Senate, has no problem cutting off their noses to spite their face if it means that they can get back at Trump.
Yeah, and and that's the frustration that I have, is that you weren't elected to the Senate or Congress to go and fight the political battles, the personal battles, whether or not you are totally 100% MAGA, or whether you dislike Trump. That's not actually relevant to your job. I mean, the SAVE Act is something that is relevant and would actually even be serving Democrat voters, the legitimate ones, right? And so this is something where I think the base of Republicans is very frustrated seeing the old establishment like Mitch McConnell and Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Tom Tillis, the 4 that voted against attaching the SAVE Act to reconciliation, who voted against it, seeing kind of that old guard still stiffen their spine and say, we're not going to do this on behalf of the American people just to get back at Trump. I mean, that's why Trump, I think, has been so successful in primarying some of his political opposition, like Thomas Massie, for example, because it's like, if you're not on the team, well, then, get off of the playing field. And we want to have players who will actually step up and bat for the team. And yet we don't see as much. I mean, well, McConnell's retiring, but we don't see that same kind of effort put into some of the races. And some people are saying, that Collins and Murkowski, just based on the difficulties, the ranked choice voting, some of those things in Alaska and so forth, and just the demographic anyway, it would be very difficult to have a pro-Trump senator elected. But, I mean, why doesn't he put a ton of money into those races and at least try anyway?
Well, I think that, with the president in making, electoral endorsements and choices, I think that sometimes the president, is going to go off of his own personal relationships with said individuals, regardless of their voting record, which sometimes in the past I know has not led to some of the best electoral endorsements from the current administration. But I think that overall what we've seen, especially in this primary cycle, we have really seen the base strike back. And I think that, despite everything that's happened since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA has remained to be one of the most important electoral machines for especially conservative MAGA Republicans. I mean, the work that they've done across the state in the primary field, especially where I'm at here in Texas, and the work that they've done to get Beau French elected in the primary runoff, really that more effort needs to be directed. And I think that kind of group and groups similar to it need to be working closer with the administration to say, listen, the needs of the voters has to come first rather than these personal relationships, because more often than not, we see a lot of, Republicans who will say that they're MAGA or America first, but really that just means that they're going to say whatever they need to do to get elected and will vote to the left of Chairman Mao when it comes time on the big issues, whether it's the SAVE Act or an immigration moratorium.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And I think that, as we move forward in a post-Trump GOP, hopefully there will be some kind of equilibrium, and it won't be, this just total loyalty or vitriol against one person, and maybe the GOP can coalesce behind, principles and an agenda instead of just a personality. I hope that might be one of the things that will be good in a post-Trump world, but ultimately, the SAVE Act would really help California in its ballots and its whole process. It would actually require documentary proof of U.S. citizenship, and California, as you mentioned, currently allows registration using just a driver's license number. They use, a wide variety of other things, and voters would need to present physical proof of citizenship. And the real world effect would be that millions, likely, of already registered Californians would be forced to re-verify eligibility. But my producer, Luke, was just saying that he still receives a ballot at his parents' house in California a decade after moving, and he lives in Texas. I mean, this is the problem with the system and not purging the voter rolls. And so Congress really needs to step up. But really appreciate it, Matthew Williams. And again, you can follow him at The Prudentialist on X. We will be right back with more.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
When I was feeling the stress of too much credit card debt, I looked at two different options: debt settlement and debt management. They may sound the same, but guess what? They're not. Debt settlement seemed like a quick fix, but I found out it would destroy my credit, create tax headaches, and hit me with huge fees. They actually told me to stop paying my bills. No way, not me. Then I turned to a debt management plan developed by the team at Trinity. They worked with my creditors, lowered my payments, reduced my interest, saved me thousands, and paid off my debt. And Trinity is a Christian company, which is important to me.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
Hey everybody, Walker Wildman here. We just got done filming here at Wall Builders Library in Aledo, Texas with Stephen McDowell, Tim Barton, Rick Green, and myself. Episode 9 of AFA at Home, One Nation Under God, celebrating America's 250th anniversary. That's our theme. That's our title and subtitle for this video session. Coming out very soon for you. Stay tuned on July 4th, 2026, on America's 250th birthday. We're going to release this video. It's jam-packed full of American history, why we're here, why our founding fathers did what they did, why they fought and died for our nation. Stay tuned. Make sure to check us out at stream.afa.net. Follow all of AFA's major social media platforms, and make sure you share this with family and friends.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. A former editor for Vogue, the fashion magazine, says she got triggered because she was the only black person in the first-class cabin of a jetliner bound for Milan. Gabriella Johnson posted a screed on social media explaining that she found herself surrounded by 5 middle-aged white guys and she was the lone black woman. She surmised that because she is black, she would be subjected to substandard service because the flight attendant was a man. Miss Johnson wailed that she suffered microaggressions from the moment she sat down, so she demanded the airline downgrade her to a business class ticket. She said that she would gladly sacrifice physical comfort to protect her emotional and mental well-being. Ms. Johnson did not reveal the name of the airline. She also failed to disclose the nature of the microaggression that set her off. Maybe the flight attendant forgot to give her one of those hot hand towels. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, there is a renewed emphasis on rights of the child and rights of parents in the context of medical caregiving. And this is just a horrendous story out of Texas where a young 2-year-old girl has been hospitalized in Texas Children's Hospital since Memorial Day after a near drowning incident. She wandered away apparently from her family at an event and was found at the bottom of a pool without her life jacket. Resuscitation efforts were underway. And so Texas Children's Hospital is now saying that they have exhausted all medically viable options, even though the parents have requested to transfer her to 24 other hospitals, at least according to Fox 26 Houston, to give some alternative treatments that may help her that are not available at Texas Children's Hospital. But Steve Toth, who you'll recall is the candidate for Congress who actually won out in the primary against Dan Crenshaw, has been following this case very closely. You can follow him at Steve Toth TX for Texas on X. He posted, "This is not even close to being factual, that Texas Children's Hospital has tried to transfer her without those other hospitals receiving her." Texas Children's, he goes on to say, had even stooped to filing a complaint with Child Protective Services because the family wanted to move her. I intervened with the Department of Family Protective Services that oversees CPS. Texas Children's is purposefully blocking her transfer. So now Attorney General Ken Paxton is also involved. He's also candidate, of course, for Senate now from Texas. And he said this young girl, her name's Annalise Camp, is fighting for her life and deserves a medical team that will fight just as hard. I'm calling on Texas Children's to prioritize the treatment her family is seeking or will allow adequate time to transfer her to a hospital that will they do the right thing and accept Annalise as a patient. I'm closely monitoring this case and will act to protect this child and honor her parents' efforts to save her. Well, let's welcome in Dr. Heidi Klessig, who is a former anesthesiologist and author of the book titled The Brain Death Fallacy. And Heidi, I was looking through a lot of what you've posted on X about this case in particular, but overall, just this requirement of hospitals that then want to test for quote-unquote brain death, particularly in these types of situations and near-drowning incidents. And you've said, and a lot of your work has shown, that that's actually just a fallacy, and that's something that shouldn't ultimately happen, and hospitals need to do more to protect life. So, walk us through how you see this case and the brain death fallacy overall.
Well, thank you so much, Jenna. This is such an important case, and I'm so glad that the Camp family is getting so much outpouring of prayers and support for Annalise. The fight is not over. Now, there is still hope that someone will accept her and transfer and give her the type of treatment she deserves. But, death is something that we all seem to feel we have an intuitive understanding of. And up until just 1968, you really didn't need a doctor to tell you if someone was dead or alive. This was something people recognized at home, on the farm, on the battlefield. Most people are not materialists. Most people understand that death is the separation of the immaterial spirit or soul from the body. But because our spirit is immaterial, we don't have a device that can see, the departure of the immaterial. We don't have a soulometer or a spiritometer. So historically, people have recognized death because there was an absence of heartbeat, absence of breathing, and enough passage of time to know that those things weren't going to come back. But in 1968, 13 men at Harvard Medical School proposed that we could redefine death. And they wrote a landmark article in the Journal of the American Medical Association called A Definition of Irreversible Coma. This paper does not have any scientific references. There were no tests, no studies, no evidence that this idea of comatose people maybe being dead already, this was just something they thought up as a utilitarian definition. When you read the paper, the committee does never say that these people are actually dead. The committee described these comatose people as being desperately injured. And moreover, the committee thought they were, quote, a burden to themselves and others. And they proposed that if we would take this new idea and say people in a deep coma are dead, it would have societal utilitarian benefits of freeing up ICU beds, and it would also remove the controversy over using comatose people as organ donors. In fact, the chairman of the committee, Henry Beecher, said there is a great need for the tissues and organs of the hopelessly comatose in order to restore health to those who are still salvageable. So it wasn't actually, even by the committee, thought to be dead. I mean, how can a corpse be burdened? It's ridiculous. But this redefinition, it caught on, and it is of great utility because it allows organ procurement to skirt what's known as the dead donor rule by simply declaring comatose people to be somehow dead. Now, the dead donor rule is not a law, but it's an ethical maxim that says you cannot take alive people and kill them by the process of removing their organs. But if you redefine people with a beating heart in a deep coma as being dead already, now the dead donor rule is met by sleight of hand. And people with a beating heart, their organs are in great shape for transplant. So transplant was driving this brain death definition. But in Annalise's case, of course, there is no thought of donating her organs. Her family is not thinking about that. So then the other utilitarian goal of the Harvard Ad Hoc Committee comes up. It frees up ICU beds. And so what Texas Children is looking to do, if they do a series of tests and declare Annalise to be brain dead, then they have no more duty to continue her care and can withdraw her support unilaterally over her parents' objections.
Wow. And that, I mean, there are so many ethics questions implicit in this, but this raises, of course, the question of medical duty, because it should be the first duty of caretakers to first do no harm, obviously, but also to try everything possible to save the patient, not look at this through a utilitarian lens. And so how can it be possible, though, that if these series of tests are performed and the hospital says we can't do anything else, that they can unilaterally remove life support over the parents' objections and even over transferring her perhaps to a different medical facility that would continue to give her care?
That's correct. So this is where we've landed. I've talked to Dr. Paul Byrne, who is in his 90s now, and he's been crusading against this brain death fallacy since the 1970s. And he remembers practicing medicine before this new idea of brain death. And he said back in those days, doctors felt a duty to protect and preserve the health of their own patient. But with this redefinition of death, now doctors have their loyalties are divided. Now they also feel a duty to provide organs for people who might need them. And so doctors do not have the same viewpoint as they did before this redefinition. Now, the American Academy of Neurology just came out in November of last year with additional guidance on how doctors should approach people who object to a brain death diagnosis, as is happening right now with the Annalise Camp family. And they said that there is no ethical obligation to provide treatment for someone who has been declared brain dead, except, and this is very interesting, in the state of New Jersey, because New Jersey has a law stating that there is a religious exemption to the idea of brain death. So in New Jersey, if you have a religious objection to the idea that someone in a coma is somehow dead, you may not have your care withdrawn. So in the American Academy of Neurology Statement of Guidance on how to handle objections, they say you don't have to continue to provide medical treatment unless you live in New Jersey and can prove a religious exemption. So whether you're dead or alive basically becomes a matter of geography. You know, where are you in time and space, which is fairly ridiculous. They also say in this Statement of Guidance that if you request a transfer to another facility, the healthcare team should inform the family that they will present the relevant information to the identified facility, but the request may not be granted. So basically, you can ask for a transfer, but good luck to you, right? And then they also say that if the parents or the family will not resolve conflict, will continue to maintain that their loved one is not dead, the policy is to unilaterally withdraw support over the objections of the family. And again, these ethical guidance statements, they're not laws, but this is how the hospital system bases its policy.
Yeah, and that just makes no logical sense if we're determining death based on actual biology, a beating heartbeat versus a corpse. That shouldn't be a matter of religious objection. I mean, it doesn't make sense then. I mean, that itself, I think, evidences a brain death fallacy, because if a religious objection can be inserted over and above a medical determination, then that determination must inherently be flawed, because it wouldn't be concrete. It would be a matter of subjective opinion, and death isn't a matter of perception. It's a matter of reality. And so that's so fascinating that New Jersey is the one state that will take that religious exemption. Why haven't other states incorporated an understanding of exactly what you've gone through with the Harvard study and the utilitarian functioning and said this is genuinely unethical, because doctors clearly would be divided in those instances, rather than having their full attention and value placed on the life saving of their patient?
Yeah, you are absolutely right, Jenna. Brain death is an ethical choice masquerading as a medical fact. But because our society has become more and more utilitarian over time, this has taken hold. It's interesting, in New Jersey, it was the Orthodox Jewish community that got their law passed there, and I wish it was a law in other states. You're also absolutely right when you say that brain death is obviously not biological death. These people are not biologically dead. Their hearts are beating, they're absorbing oxygen, they have metabolism, they excrete waste, they heal their wounds, they fight their infections, and they are by no stretch of the imagination biologically dead. And people have actually recovered from a diagnosis of brain death made exactly according to the American Academy of Neurology guidelines. And people ask me, how can someone who's brain dead recover? And it's actually a very easy thing to understand. During a brain injury, the brain swells, and it decreases the flow of blood to the brain. When the brain has low blood flow, it shuts down its functions to reduce its energy requirements. And at about a 50% reduction in blood flow, your EEG will become flatline, and your brain will become unresponsive to testing. So you'll look as though you're brain dead. But actually, tissue breakdown, tissue necrosis, doesn't begin until brain blood flow drops below 20% of normal over several hours. So there's this window between 20 and 50% of normal blood flow to the brain when there's not enough flow to support function, but there is enough flow to support viability. So that's why these people could improve. It's very much like a power outage in your home. When the power goes out, the lights are off, the refrigerator isn't running, nothing works, but the wiring isn't destroyed. Get that current flowing again, and the lights will come back on. And it's exactly analogous in someone declared brain dead during that period of low blood flow. Get that blood flow to the brain restored, and for a proportion of these people, at least, the lights can come back on. Again, GI, this is not biological death. This is an ethical choice masquerading as a medical fact.
Wow. And this just shows, as you mentioned, Dr. Klessig, that as our society becomes more utilitarian, doesn't value life, and that every human being is made in the image of God, has inherent dignity and worth and a right to life, then we are just replacing the principles of true medicine and the biology with these subjective determinations. I mean, much like the abortion industry will say subjectively, well, personhood doesn't attach until the third trimester or after birth, and so ethically, then abortion is okay in some instances, when the medical definition is an intervention specifically designed to cause the death of the child, who should be a patient. There should be two patients, the mother and the child, in the operating room. And then other ways that we have as a society kind of reinvented this terminology so that we can basically get rid of the young unborn who are unwanted pregnancies, and then older people who the conclusion of life bills, or some of these other things that are subjectively determining when a life should end for certain people. We're basically playing God, and this is ethically and morally wrong. And how has the medical community then perpetuated this fallacy onto society? And because until I started reading your work, I was under the impression, even as a conservative Christian, that brain death was an actual medical diagnosis, and that, if someone was brain dead, they were genuinely deceased. And so you're removing life support that just, keeps maybe their body functioning, but for the actual definition of death, that was certain, but clearly that's not the case. And so we're just reinventing the subjective terminology so that we can, for utilitarian purposes, unburden ourselves from people who are taking up care. How was this myth perpetuated for so long?
Well, I'll tell you how it happened. So back when I was doing my training, this was back in the 1980s, it was thought at that time that if someone had severe brain damage, they would go on to die in the normal sense very quickly. They thought if you had a severe brain injury, you'd probably die within a week at the most. So these people were thought to be as good as dead anyway, so why not declare them dead a little early and make use of their viable organs and tissues. Well, the interesting thing is it turned out to be false. Dr. Alan Schumann, a pediatric neurologist at UCLA Medical School, he found and published a paper in 1998, 175 cases of people who had been declared brain dead who continued to live, one ultimately for more than 20 years. And because of this finding, there was a presidential committee that was convened in 2008, and they agreed. Dr. Schumann is quite right. We were wrong when we thought these people would die quickly. So they said, well, what do we do now? I mean, do we just admit that we were wrong? I mean, that would have a huge impact on organ donation. So they said, we'll need to develop a new rationale. And so what they did is they based brain death no longer on biology, but on a questionable philosophy. They said a person is no longer alive when they cannot perform what was called the fundamental vital work of a living organism. For no reason whatsoever, they happen to pick this person is unresponsive and needs a ventilator to help them breathe. Now, this is an arbitrary level of disability. I mean, really, if you're not going to base death on biology, any level of disability you're going to pick is going to be arbitrary. So they're saying these people in a deep coma who need a ventilator to help them breathe are as good as dead, even though they are obviously biologically alive. There is no evidence that their soul or their spirit has departed. And interestingly, they are not even dead according to the law. They are not legally dead. The death determination, as far as legality, is called the Uniform Determination of Death Act. And for a brain death diagnosis, it says that there must be the irreversible cessation of all functions of the entire brain, including the brain stem. Come to find out, the American Academy of Neurology brain death guideline explicitly in its guideline allows people with ongoing brain function to be declared dead. which is in defiance of the law under the UDDA that says there has to be the irreversible cessation of all functions of the entire brain, right? And this is a problem. And the American Academy of Neurology is aware of this, and so they actually petitioned the Uniform Law Commission about revising the Uniform Determination of Death Act to make it comply with their guideline for brain death. And I was an observer to the Uniform Law Commission as they met to discuss this revision. I was watching them as they were presenting their proposals at their annual meeting in Hawaii in 2023. And a lawyer asked a question. He says, why are we being asked to change the law in order to accommodate doctors who are not complying with it? He said, why don't we require doctors to follow the law? And that was the idea that prevailed. The Uniform Law Commission could not reach consensus about changing the Uniform Determination of Death Act, and they tabled their efforts. So to this day, there is a mismatch between the law, what it means to be legally dead, and what is actually practiced. So if Texas Children declares Annalise to be brain dead according to the American Academy of Neurology brain death guideline, they are doing it in defiance of the definition of death under the UDDA.
Wow. Well, we have to take a break here, but Dr. Heidi Klessig, I'm so fascinated by this topic, and I so appreciate you coming on. We'll have to have you back on again soon, because I could do the entire hour and more with you on this topic, and it just goes to show that we as a society need to go back to valuing life, to not having these arbitrary distinctions in order to function more utilitarian, because this is basically like death panels saying that just because a person is comatose or they're taking up an ICU bed, that somehow they have less inherent dignity and worth than someone else who may need their organs. We don't, and we shouldn't, have a hierarchy of value in our medical industry, but that's what we see from conception all the way until natural death on that scale, that unfortunately we've become so utilitarian. So thank you so much. Follow her at Heidi K. Klessig, MD, and we'll be right back with more.
God delights in showing his will to hearts that are humble and open before him. Come with a spirit that says, Lord, show me what you want me to do, and I will do it. And that kind of heart is the heart that God always guides.
Dr. David Jeremiah continues his new series, The Holy Spirit You May Not Know, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
I'd like to preview a new book that's coming out. It's called The Jesus Discoveries. So let's listen to Jeremiah Johnston.
In other words, Jesus' name was so powerful, it was being invoked by pagans around the Mediterranean world because they had heard this name Jesus healed people and it had power.
What do you think about that, Tony?
It's amazing, and I'm not surprised.
Today's Issues, weekday mornings at 11 Eastern, 10 Central on American Family Radio.
What if healthcare could be more than bills and bureaucracy? What if it could reflect faith, foster community, and offer spiritual support? At Redeem HealthShare Ministry, the mission goes beyond medical bills. It's about honoring Christ and embracing healthcare that aligns with Christian values. Redeem members share medical expenses through monthly contributions, supporting one another in a Christ-centered community. It's not insurance, it's believers helping believers through financial support and prayer. And Redeem HealthShare provides freedom for members to select the doctors, hospitals, and treatments that are right for them. No networks, no restrictions, just faith-driven care. From everyday checkups to unexpected medical emergencies, Redeem offers flexible programs and encouragement rooted in Scripture. Because your healthcare should reflect your faith, not compromise it. More at redeemhealthshare.org or call 1-844-REDEEM-0.
America was founded as a nation under God, but the U.S. Supreme Court has broken our national relationship with God. Many court rulings have contributed, but three stand out. In 1962, the court removed prayer from public schools. In 1963, the court removed Bible reading from public schools. And lastly, in 1980, the court removed the Ten Commandments from America's classrooms. The Supreme Court broke our relationship with God, and any restoration of that relationship must include the Supreme Court. And a vacancy on the Supreme Court could soon be coming. So please support AFA Action's urgent legal work to help President Trump select and the U.S. Senate confirm godly constitutional justices for the Supreme Court. We put thousands of hours of research into potential nominees. We use our networks at the Trump administration and the U.S. Senate to promote the good nominees and oppose the bad ones. AFA Action needs the resources of supporters like you to help maximize our efforts. So please visit afaaction.net to learn more and donate today.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, speaking of society becoming more and more utilitarian with respect to life, there was a story that went viral this last week that a YouTuber and influencer and his wife chose to abort their child, and it's ranged from whether it was 3 months or a little longer, exactly where in the stage in the pregnancy they chose to abort their child because of a diagnosis potentially due to Down syndrome. And this is just absolutely horrific. And of course, the pro-life community and anyone just rational and reasonable posted in response to this father who chose to kill his child because he would potentially be inconvenienced by a disability. They of course posted that this is immoral. This should never be allowed in a society that is moral or has any sort of ethics surrounding children. And then this man just continues, even as of just a few moments ago, posting and suggesting that the backlash is something that he didn't anticipate, and that he was stunned by that, and that even though they received messages of support, they've also gotten threats, and suggested that if they were to share this, he was hoping that it would be a net positive for people, which is just incredible to me that people in this age and society are openly willing to brag, essentially, about choosing to kill their child just because there may be a potential diagnosis, and doctors get this wrong all the time, there may be a potential diagnosis of Down syndrome. And this has just renewed the calls for legislation that selective abortion for these types of diagnoses, based on the gender, based on any just preference of the parents, should never be allowed. And that includes even just the preference of, hey, I'm not ready to have a baby, or I can't financially afford one. All of those things go to the desire of adults over the safety, well-being, and affirmation of the right to life of the child. So let's welcome in Father Frank Pavone, who's the founder of Priests for Life. And Frank, I just was so heartbroken at this story, and to see how, these parents termed their child a baby, rightly so, until they decided that it wasn't worth the potential possibility of caring for a disabled child. I mean, this is where we're at in this country, and it's utterly, utterly evil.
Yes, Jenna, thanks for having me on about this. Let me invite the audience to do a little thought experiment here and use it when they're talking to others about this, because those who disagree with us will say to us, well, you're lacking in compassion. So the thought experiment is this. Okay, let's take the same scenario. You've conceived a baby that has Down syndrome, okay? But let's say you don't find out about it until the birth. So the baby comes, you deliver the child, and now on the delivery table, the doctor finds out this baby has Down syndrome. Okay, what do we do? At that moment, the kinds of fears, the kinds of distress, the parents themselves are heartbroken, of course, in this video. What do we say in compassion for these parents? And would we in that situation say, hey, wait a second, we'll just, here, I'm going to chop the head off the baby right now. Let's just kill the baby, because then, we have compassion for you. We don't want the family to go through this terrible distress. We're just going to kill the baby right here and now. Now, if anyone, well, you're talking to says, no, that's not a solution, then the question becomes, okay, So do you have less compassion for those parents than you do for these? This story goes out there. The baby it has Down syndrome. Okay, yes, that's challenging, but not, we know, most of us know, families that have a Down syndrome baby, that, the joy that the love engenders is palpable. It's real. But do we have less compassion because we're telling the parents who find out when the baby is born that they can't kill the baby? Than we have for these parents who were saying, it's not that we don't have compassion for you, but you can't kill your own child. Mm-hmm. And I think that comparison, Jenna, can help people think this through and make the distinctions that are necessary regarding compassion versus the immorality of killing.
Yeah, and so well said, because no one, even the most, heinously evil who are supporting these parents' decision online would suggest that if the diagnosis had happened after birth, that the parent should be able at that moment or later, or at some arbitrary marker down the road at, 3, 5, that the parent should retain the decision to kill their child based on a disability. Nobody would be arguing that. But yet there is still an arbitrary distinction between a child that's 12 weeks, 21 weeks, 6 months versus born. And that's the challenge, I think, for pro-lifers, because there's still these this artificial terminology to say that somehow, a fetus doesn't mean a baby. I mean, that's just the same word in Latin for baby. I mean, it doesn't change, whatever we term it, it doesn't change the fact that this is a human being. And so that's the challenge. How do we start to unwind that and convince a society that wants unborn life to be expendable, that there is no moral distinction between an unborn child and one that has already been born?
Yeah. Well, what this discussion reveals, of course, in the thought experiment that I just outlined reveals, is that we're dealing here with discrimination. That's what it is. We're dealing with discrimination against the unborn. Yes, discrimination against Down syndrome babies, but we're dealing with discrimination against the unborn. Simply because of your age, you no longer have the right to life. That's the most unjust form of discrimination. Now, how do we start to change that? Number one, Jenna, we got to see the unborn child. Let me recommend to our audience childrenbeforebirth.com, childrenbeforebirth.com. And on that website, people will see that there's an app called See Baby Grow. See Baby Grow. The absolute best video imagery of the unborn baby. Video imagery, not animation, video. And that's number one, we have to see the child. Number two, how do we talk about the unborn? If we want to change, like you're saying, how we treat them and bring ourselves to the point where we treat them equally as their right to life deserves, we got to talk about them differently. What do I mean? Well, Jenna, Father's Day is coming up. Now, if somebody knows a man whose wife is pregnant, you're going to give him a Father's Day card? He is a father. He's not going to be a father. He is a father. And this is key. This might seem like a small little thing, but it's a big thing, because you're asking, how do we make a cultural change? And ultimately, of course, we want to translate it to public policy to protect these babies. We've got to recognize that these are children just like any born child. These are people just like you and I. And if we're going to recognize that, we've got to talk about it that way. So the father of an unborn baby is a father. The mother is not going to be a mother. She is a mother. The grandparents are not going to be grandparents. They are grandparents. The baby is not on the way. We say that, even the very best of pro-life people. We're just in the habit of saying that. But we've got to look at that as, wait a minute, that doesn't serve our cause. Because if something's on the way, it means it's not here yet. So what do you mean it's not here yet? That's a baby. So I think these little ways of, making these adjustments, it's not small things, it's big things. And the other thing, too, Jenna, this father on this viral video made this comment about, the Down syndrome, 50% will have vision problems. What in the world does that say about, all of us who wear glasses? What are you saying? 50% have vision problems. And so what? That means you can kill them? What are you saying? Or they'll have poor muscle tone. Well, how about those of us that are born that have that problem? Learning disabilities. You mean you're going to go out and start killing everybody that's got a learning disability? What in the world kind of mindset this is? And again, it's shrouded in compassion, but boy, this is a dangerous way of thinking.
Yeah, and and it also flies in the face of what leftists purportedly advocate for, which is diversity, right? I mean, to say that only in their view, the normative, quote unquote, perfect human being has a right to live, unless, of course, the parents for any other purpose, whether it's, gender selection, whether it's economic issues, whether it's just merely unwanted in their opinion, those are also acceptable choices, according to them, to abort even perfectly healthy children. And so this is a whole mindset that somehow, as you said, the child is not a person yet with full rights attached until it is, quote unquote, here. And I fully agree with you that we need to start changing our language and say, no, the baby is here. The baby has already been conceived. It is here. It's in utero. You may not be able to see it without an ultrasound yet, but that's still a full human being, just at a different stage of development. Or a different age, but it is fully here, and we need to make those distinctions. We're already at a time, Frank Pavone, but I so appreciate you drawing these distinctions, and I am hopeful that these types of clearly horrific decision-making, I mean, with this influencers just out there saying, we chose to abort because of a potential diagnosis of Down syndrome, that kind of example of expendable children in our society hopefully will prick the conscience of the majority of us enough to start making abortion not just illegal but also unthinkable. So Father Frank Pavone, really appreciate it. You can follow him across social media, and as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.